out everything that I was saying. But basically, I didn't understand how we can have these chants, these no justice, no peace chants, and then people call for peaceful demonstrations in response to injustice. And I think this speaks to why my curriculum is white, why my institutions are white, because I think when people chant no justice, no peace, they think they're doing the work just by chanting, just by showing up at events. I also think when people, especially in my school, talk about history, they imagine themselves to be on the right side of history. So every white person in my class imagined themselves as an abolitionist if they would have been alive during slavery. And every black person in my class imagined themselves as a freedom fighter or as a Harriet Tubman, breaking people out of slavery, taking them in the Underground Railroad. This is how we imagine ourselves when we think about movements in the past. So when we choose the textbooks in class to teach, we think about stories that we want to tell that involve a relatively peaceful foundation, because these things make us comfortable. It's easier to talk about peaceful or nonviolent people as a white professor in a university because they resonate more with those stories. So I remember, like I said here, I remember feeling powerless as a law student. So raise your hand if you've heard of Harvard. Don't laugh at me. So, okay, first things first, like, I'm a poor black girl from St. Louis, Missouri. So Harvard was just as foreign of a place to me as it may be to many people in this audience. I don't want to say I was a still poor black girl. I'm still kind of poor, but anyway, I'm in a different place. So when I went to law school, I was hoping to become a civil rights lawyer to fight some of these injustices. And instead, I was met with a curriculum that was so silent on the injustices of people who I know to be true. For example, how can you have a class on property and not ever mention that black people were once property? We had laws to govern how black people's bodies were 3/5 of a human being. Black people were traded and sold and bought, and that's not mentioned in property class in my school. Instead, what was mentioned, all of the reasons that justified how England, how other countries could take away land from indigenous people. And then I had a professor to have the nerve to say, you know, when we were taking their land, he didn't say when we were taking their land, but he said, in this process, the natives, they weren't always peaceful. Like, damn straight, you're stealing land from them. Like, what do you mean they weren't always peaceful? I know they weren't always peaceful, but if this is the only way that you mention their story and the way where you're showing, oh, they fought back, that's problematic. That curriculum is going to inform how my classmates are now going to go out and become the president, how they're going to go out and become Supreme Court justices, how they're going to go out and prosecute or not prosecute people who are going to be extremely violent against oppressed people. So when I think about the impact of a white curriculum, I don't just think about it abstractly. I think about what is going to inform our decisions as future lawyers and future leaders of this country. So I didn't come from the same background as most of my classmates. Most of my classmates have parents who went to Ivy League institutions. Most of my classmates are not first-generation college students like I am. Most of my classmates do not come from my socioeconomic background. So it felt like a very violent experience to have all this injustice going home in a city where I was from, and then to enter a law school, and they like to call it a justice school, right? And do you guys know what orientation is? That's when they make you feel good about starting the university. They're like, oh, we love you, like, here's free stuff, like, you know what I'm talking about? So at our orientation, our dean gets up, she says, this is a justice school. And I'm like, it's not a justice school. Oh, if you laugh, you probably get that joke. This is not yet a justice school. But I had that belief that it would become a justice school if we had serious conversations about race and oppression. But when we're hiding those stories, when we're afraid of telling stories of when people fought back in society, we're actually doing more injustice because, again, like I said, my colleagues are going to make decisions based off their curriculum. So it's it's important to talk about curriculum being white abstractly, but this is actually a matter of life and death. So I think about the prosecutor in St. Louis who chose not to prosecute Darren Wilson after he murdered Michael Brown. I thought about the institution where he went to law school. He went to a predominantly white law school in St. Louis, or did he go to Columbia? He actually went to a predominantly white school in Missouri. Whose curriculum, I'm sure, modeled Harvard's curriculum, because we created like the model curriculum for the rest of the country. So that curriculum is being modeled after what I'm being taught. Could you imagine how many other people, how many other lawyers are going out into the world and not thinking critically about the work that they're doing? And it's literally a matter of life and death. So I want to share that quick story. In our workshop, I think we're going to talk about some of the ways we organize against the white curriculum at my college and my undergrad. I think we're going to talk generally about movements that we've seen students fight back in peaceful ways and less peaceful ways. And now I'm just going to pass the microphone to Nyle. Oh, wow. That's good. You can say your story.
Okay, cool. So I didn't think I was going to be able to do my part, but I'll try to do it quickly because I didn't know we were going to do it together. So I'm about to play a video. I haven't done much student organizing in my life. I've done more community organizing. And so I come to this conversation as a community organizer who just started a Ph.D. program, who's interested in making connections between grassroots community organizing, right? So the question about where we place as a university is always placed in communities with people who don't always have access to the university. So I'm coming to this conversation more as a community organizer who's now trying to make a transition into making these connections. So before we start the video, this person right here, her name is Marilyn Zuniga. She's a close friend of mine. She's a third grade teacher in a black suburb in New Jersey called Orange. Marilyn Zuniga, during the month of Black History, wanted to teach Black history in a way that wasn't the dominant narrative, the hegemonic narrative, that gives the same old characters, that upholds the same old myth of the American dream. So she wants to introduce some new characters to her students in order to disrupt some of this hegemonic storytelling. So she introduced them to a political prisoner by the name of Mumia Abu-Jamal, who you may or may not have heard of. He's one of the more, probably the most famous political prisoner in the world. And so she was reprimanded, she was punished for doing this, and eventually fired. But before she was fired, this was us at the Board of Education in Orange challenging their punishment of her as a teacher. So I'm just gonna play this video and then talk a little bit.
Is it from the beginning?
It's not working.
Oh, let me refresh.
This organization for progress appeals to the village. Number one, not to terminate Maryland's illegal. Number two, we ask that you lift the suspension on this teacher. Number three, we ask that you restore her to her job and let her continue to teach the compassion that our children need to learn.
I loved my children the moment they stepped into my classroom. As a teacher, I am well aware that my role as an educator is not limited to the classroom. Knowing this is what inspires me to be so active in our community. Since beginning my first year of teaching in September, I have had the privilege of working in multiple projects that provide great opportunities for children in our community. For example, I helped establish the Maroon Project, a new community organization based in Newark. I also coordinate Newark's first and only Books and Breakfast program, a monthly program that provides free books and healthy breakfast for local youth and families. On February 5th, I presented a do now that stated, "What is the main idea of this quote? So long as one just person is silenced, there is no justice. This quote is by Mumia Abu Jamal. In April, I mentioned to my students that Mumia was very ill, and they told me they would like to write get well letters to Mumia. The most important fact to highlight in this entire matter is my love for and commitment to my students. I have always put my children first, and I have never and would never put their safety at risk. I was very proud of my students' work when I shared this on social media. I do apologize to parents, students, and community members for having done that.
No.
My parents, co-workers, and students have always been aware of how much I care for my students and their families and for the entire Orange community. The love I have for all my students, as well as their families and the community of Orange, remains my first priority. There is nothing I want more than to remain teaching, terminate me, than I...
The board has decided to table.
All right, so could have edited the video better. I didn't want to go through the whole speech, so I'll be really quick. So again, I'm coming to this conversation trying to connect a real life organizing experience that I was deeply involved in to the university. And so this township of Orange is very interesting. One of the reasons why it's interesting is because it has complete black leadership. So as you saw on the Board of Education, everybody's black. A lot of the teachers are black. The principal of the school is black. And so one of the sort of phenomena, I think, in the United States at least, is that since the late 60s, early 70s, we've had a black leadership class rise up. Many, what we call chocolate cities, now have black mayors. Many of these townships have black Board of Education systems, and we have, most famously, a black president. And so just one point that I would like to make, and hopefully we can sort of talk about this a little bit more in the workshop, is that there were a lot of stories being told, and we've been talking a lot about storytelling, a lot of stories being told when President Obama got elected of a post-racial America, or of a colorblind society. You might have heard of these right? And so these stories and this storytelling was being used as a way to obscure the reality of race and racism in the United States of America. And so why I think this point is important is because when we think about decolonizing the university, some of the responses may be, well, let's add more people of color, all right? Let's get more black professors. Let's get more non-white people in this department and that faculty. And while I think that is actually very important, I also want to challenge us to think about, coming from particularly this context, look at these faces. This is who ran the school board, who essentially punished this teacher for trying to teach something that was relevant to black children. And so I just want to challenge us all to begin to think more critically about identity politics, to think more critically about how we can decolonize a university that's not based upon simply adding minority groups to particular departments or being able to tell just a blacker story, because we don't just need to tell a blacker story or a more indigenous story or a more queer story. We need to tell a more radical story. And so we know integration does not mean transformation. So as we go throughout our workshops today, that's just something that hopefully we can think about together, and I'll be really interested to hear your context and your thoughts on that. Thank you.